Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Coach's Corner. My name is Dwayne Dwyer. I go by the Mindset Coach,
My name is the Uncle Junior, and I go by the Consistency Coach.
and we are your coaches for Coach's Corner. As always, like we tend to say, if you are not going to do anything with this information, you're not going to take it and add it to your life and start making some changes that will not only like alter the course of your life, but be an impact to those that surround you, then this may not necessarily be the place for you. However, if you are here on this evening, I truly believe that you are destined to be here tonight. I truly believe that you are destined to hear myself, the mindset coach, and my good friend, the consistency coach, talk about whatever it is that we're going to talk about because we believe that it will be impactful to you and the people that you know, love, and care about. So, that being said, let me speak to my good friend, the Uncle Junior himself, the consistency coach, C Square. How you doing, brother?
Man, I am doing good over here trying to cut off my do not disturb on so I don't get no more notifications. Sometimes I forget, man, when we come on here. But I just want to make sure I'm respectful of the show and the conversation, to not have all these sidebar um notifications and distractions, I would
Yeah.
say. So, but I'm doing well, man. Lovely day. Happy to be alive, happy to be able to exercise, happy to be able to move my hands, move my feet, just little things like that that we often take for granted. I remember we used to have Sunday night growing up in church. We used to have what was it called? Testimony service. It
Mm,
was always somebody always used to come up and talk about, say people always say, I thank you for the activities of my limbs, and I never really understand that growing up, but then as a now and I got older and you see elderly people, you see people who can't walk, people who can't write, people who can't, their hands are bent from arthritis and different things like that. So I'm truly am happy for, little things that we take for granted, like being able to actually curl my fingers and wave or give somebody a peace sign or a fist bump. So
yeah.
I'm just grateful for to being able to move my body today. That's what I'm happy for, and that's what's on my mind today. What
That's
about
good.
you?
I love it, man. That's good. I too am appreciative of all of those things. Appreciative to, as always, be here to share in conversation with you, as well as the chat, who we greatly appreciate. It's a lot of things in life we tend to take for granted. It's a
Hmm.
lot of people in life that we tend to take for granted as well. And
Ooh.
so I try to be in a space to where I don't ever do that. I try to practice giving a person their flowers now while they can't appreciate them, like my grandmother always used to say. So yeah, that's just kind of like where I am. So again, greatly appreciate being able to have another conversation with you, and greatly appreciate to participate in conversation with the livest chat and social media.
You said people we
Yeah,
take
man.
for self-assessment time. I'm always looking to be better, and I
Yeah,
don't know when was the last time I looked at myself and was like, how are you treating other people?
yeah.
Literally, how are you treating other people? So yeah.
Well, I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, right?
Mm.
It goes a little bit deeper than how I treat people.
Yep.
How I treat people is a facet of my understanding of the relationship that I'm in, which we're
Mhm.
going to dive deep into that here a little bit more moving forward. But me appreciating people is
Yeah.
just me being thankful, right? Being thankful for who they are, what they do, being thankful for the things that they have planned for their life, and appreciating that. And however, I'm allowed to influence that in any shape, form, or fashion. So I think appreciation is a deep well of
Mhm.
understanding something that goes beyond my control. And I think in that space, we become extremely thankful.
Mhm.
Become a thank be thankful for the relationships that we have. Because let's just be honest, the other side of the coin is that we could not have those relationships.
Mhm.
Um, we could, as we both can relate to, we can be, back in time, trying to figure out how to maneuver in the realm of toxic relationships, right?
Mhm.
So appreciating the fact that I'm no longer where I was, appreciating the fact that the people around me, everybody that I see has their own desire to grow and be a better version of themselves. And I appreciate just being in environments like that to where in the past, it was totally not that. So yeah, that's what I'll say appreciation is for me.
I like that. So I know this is all way off the topic, but I want to ask you something. Can you get to a point to where you have too many people in your life, not that you're counting on, but just that you have interactions, you have good relationships with, I don't know, let's say for instance, I don't know, 50 people, and
Hmm.
you finding out that it's too much to manage. And you saying, "Hey, look, coach, I don't really got the extra time for you right now." It's like, are those conversations okay to have, or do you think people should try to continue those relationships? Because, and I know you can't have a whole bunch of very intimate relationships with a whole bunch of people just because you don't have the amount of time. But I guess what I'm asking is it okay? Not necessarily for me, but I'm thinking of a scenario and I'm wondering, is it okay to tell people, hey, everything is cool, but I just don't have space for you right now?
I think what you're asking, it's that's why appreciation I think is so vital. I'll start off by saying it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't manage relationships. The only thing that I manage, and I'll start this way and work back. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing that I am positioned to manage is people that on a job. I manage the people on a job, but I don't really manage them. I manage their outputs. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like what that looks like. When it comes down to a relationship, I don't necessarily manage the people I'm in relationship with. I don't even manage the relationship. Right. You all right over there, bro?
Yeah, I got them. It was a little net.
Yeah. I don't manage the people I'm in relationship with. I don't even manage the relationship. The relationship manages itself, right? And so if the relationship manages itself, then my responsibility is to manage myself and the other person's responsibility is to manage themselves. But in the space of relationship, our behavior shows each other the level of appreciation that we have for the relationship that we're in. And I think it's okay when a person's behavior says that, hey, I'm no longer in this relationship at the level that I was in that relationship. I'm okay with that. I appreciate the fact that I can recognize that. And I tend to say this all the time: energy begets energy. When that person stops showing up for that relationship, then the other person stops showing up for that relationship as well. And then those people continue to move along the path of life that they have dictated for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the mature aspect of humanity allows each person the flexibility to do in the space of relationship as they see fit for themselves. Have no ill will, no animosity whatsoever. Just appreciate the fact that that relationship existed. I appreciate the fact that I know this brother or sister, and in the midst of them charting their own course, if they ever pick up the phone and call, I'm answer the phone like, we're still in relationship as we once were,
Yeah.
because I'm excited to hear some of the advances that they made in their life. Um, may not have necessarily been a direct yes or no to your question, but I think that's why appreciation is so important because outside of appreciation, now I have expectations.
Mm.
And when the expectations set in, now I have an expectation for you to do this, for you to do that, for you to behave that way. Well, no, that's their responsibility to do, not mine.
Man, I like it. It wasn't necessarily a yes or no response, but sometimes I like those better because sometimes things need to be unpacked a little bit more and it's not as simple as yes or no. So I definitely appreciate you for that. And man, we almost 10 minutes in and we ain't even greeted the chat or even got to the first question, but I already kind of feel like or think that we're already on the topic at some, in a sense, I already kind of think that we're on topic. Because we are talking about relationships, and then we're talking about operational relationship dominance tonight. So, yeah, looking forward to the conversation and glad to be here and glad to have the space to be able to be open and have the conversation. When this is our show. I mean, yes, the people are here, and we appreciate everybody being for the chat, but we can operate how we want to as long as we operate within the the boundaries that that we kind of set aside initially, when we first started this. But it's good to whereas sometimes we can just come up here and we can just chat and we can just ask each other questions about our own personal stuff, and it's even
Sure.
better when it sometimes relates to the conversation so that we're having on at night. So
Absolutely. And let's be honest, even in those conversations, we are still serving them,
yeah.
right? Because maybe your question was a question that somebody else has.
Hmm.
So stuff like that is always good. But to your point,
Absolutely.
we greatly appreciate you guys joining us. As always, you guys are a functional part of this show. So as always, make sure that you add your perspective, make sure that you ask your questions. And as we always say, make sure you hit that like button and go ahead and share it on your social media platforms, because I think this is going to be a pretty good conversation. So, why do we keep having the same fight? You know, the one, it starts over dishes or tone of voice that detonates into accusations of you never listen or you're just like your father. What if those fights aren't about chores or snarky comments, but they're viruses? A silent generational script that hijacks your love life, replaying wars your ancestors never finished. Let's get raw for a second. 97% of relationships fail because we attack symptoms while ignoring the real weapon, which is generational malware. Programs like conflict equal abandonment or vulnerability equal death are coded into your nervous system by survival driven parents, grandparents, and a culture that profits from your loneliness. But what if you can decode your partner's emotional DNA to preempt meltdowns? Turn nuclear fights into intimacy accelerators using Harvard's biochemical hacks. In engineered trust so unshakable, your great grandkids inherit bulletproof bonds. This is Operation Relationship Dominance, the three-phase strategy used to build unbreakable teams and billionaires to engineer generational empires. You've tried therapy, you've read books. Now it's time to delete the malware. Your relationships aren't broken, they're infected. So let's disinfect them. We like to start off with kind of like a basic question. And I love basic question because it really starts to get this diesel engine rolling, right? And so we kind of touched on it just a little bit indirectly, but I really want to ask this question. And I didn't have it up, and I really just thought of it while we were talking. Um, what is the biggest concern when it comes down to relationships? And I'm not talking about yours. I'm talking about like if you've perused the social media streets or having conversations with other people or some of the things you've witnessed in your past and things of that nature. In your own opinion, what do you think the biggest concern is when it comes down to a relationship?
mm, that's a good freaking question because so many different things. Um, what I am going to start with is that it has something to do with self. Something that self is not doing, which is contributing to the relationship. What is that self thing? And that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. Um, Self awareness. I don't know, but I'm thinking it also may have something to do with communication, information, and understanding. So between communication, information, understanding, and somewhere in self, I know I said more than just one thing, but I think somewhere between the mixture of those things right there, that's where the answer lies. I
Yeah.
think the problem with relationships starts with self, because if I can't control or manage self, I can't have a relationship with Coach or Lisa Keys or Shell or anybody else that may be in the chat watching tonight. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
again, I know it has something to do with self. I can't figure out the one thing, but I think it's a combination of a bunch of things. But I wish I could come down to one thing. Um, I'm a digress to you, but before I do, I'm gonna say self. That's
Okay.
my final answer. Self is the problem with relationships.
I like it. I like your final answer, because I also agree. with your final answer as well. Um, and within the scope of your final answer, like I said, initially we spent a lot of time dissecting the symptoms. Effective communication. That's a symptom. That's not the
Mhm.
problem. Um, you know, Emotional intelligence. That's a symptom. That's not the problem. What I believe wholeheartedly is that in any area of our life, if there is a problem that exists, it's because number one, we did not or we will not accept the truth about the thing, or we don't know about the thing. And so I
Mm.
think one of the biggest problems to go, and again, this is not outside of what you said. I think when it comes down to relationships, because self is the central focus of every relationship that I'm in, right?
Mhm.
And I'm speaking facetiously when I say this. It's because I have not accepted the truth about relationships, or I am totally unaware of what a relationship is. So, in the space of that, going back to a conversation we had a couple of Friday nights ago, we have, and I think we talked about um, society or societal harmony, right?
Mm. Mhm.
And if you remember that conversation, there was some difficulties a little bit, right? Because
Differences of perspectives.
differences of perspectives, because I believe we miss a transition. We want societal harmony. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, we want societal harmony, but and I want to make sure that's what it was.
Or the personal
Um,
harmony.
it was I think it was society identity, was it? That wasn't that a talking point? Wasn't it about society identity?
I
Um,
knew it was, yeah, I think
okay,
so.
right.
Think so.
And,
Think
and
so.
so something of that magnitude.
Mhm.
So we want this societal harmony, which is found in the identity of that society, but yet we have not yet achieved our own understanding of our own personal identity. And so the natural flow of the thing is that I must achieve personal identity and then harmonize within the understanding of personal identity. Then I can open myself up to harmonize within a social identity, not society, social. Then
Social.
I can harmonize and then I can be a part of social identity. But I believe a lot of times what we do is within our personal identity, we have not found harmony, and then we go out there and try to intertwine in a social setting, and we struggle to find harmony there. And I think that's the answer to relationships. A lot of us
Mhm.
want to be in relationships hoping that the other person has the answers to my identity concerns, but it's not their responsibility to give you the answer to your identity concerns. So the
Mhm.
issue, like you said, is self. And because self does not understand relationships, have not accepted the truth about relationships, and by that same token, may be unaware about what a harmonized relationship looks like, or a harmonious relationship look like. So now with my toxic self, I go into a relationships thinking that I am going to be in harmony. It's a
Mhm.
virtual impossibility. It
Yeah.
cannot happen. So, and again, the natural flow must go from personal identity to social identity, not the other way around. I cannot find my identity in a social setting, which goes back to a whole nother conversation, which will derail this conversation, but I give you a snippet of it. My identity is found in my parents, both of them, plural, not one. So I need both of them to help me to understand who I am. Once I harmonize with that, then I can go in the world and express it, and the world give me some responses in relation to that. So now I get to fine tune the symptoms of my life based upon the information that the world has given me. So if I'm not an effective communicator, the world's going to let me know. If I'm lacking, if I'm struggling with emotional intelligence, the world is going to let me know. And it's up to me to be open minded enough to accept that information so that I can make the necessary changes moving forward to improve with interpersonal interactions.
And that was a good first question, especially since it wasn't even one that was, it was impromptu.
It was.
Um, yeah, man. Yeah, I soaked all of it up. I appreciate that. I'm glad we ain't even in the show yet. We was like, man, it's gonna be a good one. We've been rolling here lately.
Yeah, man.
And that show for everybody, just in case that missed it, aired on June the 6th. It was a Friday night. So in case you missed it, go back and find the June 6th show. It was led by Gaddy.
So first, we're going to start off with emotional cartography, cracking the codependence code, and of course, this is when you get a choice, my friend. Um, so I want to start off by saying most relationships fail because partners they tend to map reactions. So, however, my father responded to certain things, I tend to map that, so I adopt that as my response as well. Or however my mother responded to the thing, so I map that, and that becomes my response as well. So partners tend to map reactions instead of doing what I tend to call root cause analysis, right? Trying to get down to the root cause of why certain responses existed. Elite teams tend to use like a shadow archaeology, which is a method of excavating subconscious relationship algorithms passed down through family trauma and cultural conditioning. This is like, it's almost like a couple arguing about chores may be secretly battling their own parents' power struggle. And so the questions for you, sir, is first question is how might societal narratives shape entire communities to equate conflict to shame and silence with strength? And question number two, when marginalized groups default to hyper independence or communal distrust, to what degree are though are these reflexes coded by historical betrayals rather than personal choice?
Mm. I think I'm gonna start with A with the
All right.
first question. Let me read it again. How might societal narratives shape entire communities to equate conflict with shame and silence with strength? Mm. I'm looking at some societal narratives. I don't know how far I want to go back, but some people say that, culturally, I would say this. There's a lady that I know. She is black like I am, and she raised her kids not to say yes ma'am and yes sir, no ma'am, all of those things. Like a lot of black people was raised, they say I was yes ma'am, no ma'am, no sir, yes sir. That's how you was raised. And if you wasn't, it was wrong. And she said for her, the reason why she did not is she said that those were slave terms. She said those is what we black people used to have to call the masters and different things like that back in the day. So she didn't want to equate sir or ma'am or whatever to that. So that's how she chose to raise her kids. Good, bad, or indifferent, it was interesting the first time I had heard of that. So that was all new information. So I guess what I'm saying is how that little bit of information or that story relates to this question is I think that sometimes we have certain things that may have been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation, good, bad, or whatever it may be, and sometimes those things tend to like force you to kind of maintain or be calm or to not say certain things when you want to. Not yelling at somebody when you want to. Maybe that's an extreme or something like that, but just not being able to say certain things that you want to within your community because, you know, if you don't say nothing, I don't know where I'm going with this right now. I kind of had a lot of it in my head, and then now as I'm starting talking it out, I'm getting kind of confused. But I do think that some of this starts with certain things that may have that people have been learned, that have been passed down from generation after generation. Certain some of these societal narratives, and those things that happen within and affect the community. Um, yeah, let me pause right there.
No, you're good, man. You're good. I remember when I was young, I was extremely self-conscious. I had low self-esteem. Like every time I walked in a room, I automatically thought like what other people were thinking. I was very I wouldn't say I was shy, but I think I was kind of shy. Um And good, bad, or indifferent. I told you it wasn't cool to be dark skinned back in the '80s, right? The '70s and the '80s. Um, but then after playing football, getting in the weight room, getting swole, all kind of stuff like that, lettering and all kind of stuff, things of that nature, I went from this very mild, meek, passive, shy dude to this extremely self like self-aggrandizing degree of arrogance. I'm not gonna lie, I was over the top with it, bro. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I was that dude who would be
You
like,
found your
"Go,
peas.
yeah, yeah, just go away. I don't want to talk to you. Come back to see me
Yeah.
later." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it was maybe not to that extreme, but it was bad. And when I
Mhm.
think about it, it was bad. And I think that's what happens a lot of time when it comes down to these relationships and things of that nature. Like you see certain things, you see conflict in your environment, and I'm talking more so of generational patterns, right? You see where Big Mama, she used to take types of abuse and things of that nature, and then from the perspective of your mother or your father, they went to the other side because they were intentional about not being what Big Mama or Papa was, right? So now they go to the other side. So now they're extremely boisterous. They're over compensating for what took place. Also, you look at certain things like survival strategies, and you look kind of like trauma pattern. I mean, not trauma patterns, but conflict responses. And where we get to the point that we will label ourselves as being strong just for the sake of um, being resilient. And,
Mm.
and I think from concept of the social narrative now shapes an entirety of a community because and it's not just shame and silence with strength, it's all types of things, right? And so you can look at the behaviors and see how those behaviors have now moved from one generation to the other, as in maintaining or remaining the same, or going from one extreme to the other as well. And I think that kind of goes back into the other side as well, because I can't deny what has happened. I cannot deny the fact that over the years that there has been, some um, spaces to where you had to create a mindset of hyper independence. You had to understand that there has been some betrayal based upon historical data. We can't deny that part. But the interesting part is that 85 to 90% of trauma responses are historically coded, which means that my response to a trauma now at a very high degree came from my predecessors, the people who came before me. And when I look at it, I have to come to a conclusion that it is my responsibility not to blame them for anything, but to do some self-assessing and to make some necessary changes within me, because I don't care who you are, there's something in you that needs to come out, right? And it is my responsibility to pull the thing that's in me out, just like it's everybody else's responsibility to pull the thing that's within them out. So I think as much as we don't want to focus on history, I don't believe we should focus on history. We should become aware of history. We should become aware of our family history. We should become aware of, like, some of the things that happened throughout history. Like, I think even in the space of relationship, it's a necessary thing for us to have conversation about how our parents may have did a thing, and my response to that was this. Because what I'm now doing is I'm giving you a snapshot into my life and how things happen for me, so that you can become more aware of how to
Mhm.
I don't know, kind of how to respond, how to facilitate growth and all kind of things of that nature. So rambling just a little bit, but I hope I got the point across when it came down to both of those.
Yeah, and then I want to go back and add something to the first question. Kind of a I don't know if it's necessarily an analogy or not, but one of the other things I thought about was when it comes to some societal narratives and things being passed down through generations, history to now is one of those things is how grandma and great grandma used to talk about turning the cheeks when granddaddy and great granddaddy was out there doing their thing, right? And we associate, and a lot of times, if you're talking about associating silence with strength, a lot of times when those stories got passed down, we talked about the story or the narrative was grandma was really strong. She stayed in there. She didn't say anything about what grandpa was doing. And he had, had another lady and he had other kids and the Rolling Stone and all of those other different things going on. And like you said, and like we are saying with this question, some of those things, we associated grandma as being this very strong woman that she had strength, but who knows why she stayed there. Maybe there were some things that went on behind the scenes that we didn't know. Maybe grandma had a history, you know what I'm saying? Maybe there was some other different things or some context going around why things were the way that they were. We don't know the whole story. But I think that that's something that I remember hearing was talking about how these grandmas, and I hear it on social media and I've always heard it here recently over the last few years or so, talking about how small grandmas was because they stayed around there while Papa was out rolling stone. So um
Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good point. That's a good point. And I'm glad you said that. Like, you don't know the entirety of the information. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm aware of something, that's just one piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things that connect to that as well. So I think we all must keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Um,
Somebody, I mean, grandma might have had a nasty attitude, but he might have been like, look, I understand you got a nasty attitude, but we got these 14 kids that we got to raise. But you
for
know what I'm saying? Because back in the day, a lot of women, they didn't have contraceptive and stuff like this, and we had bigger families. You know what I
yeah,
mean? A lot of our grandmas came from families of plus 10, plus 12. Then you had people to work the farm and the land and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different reasons why people was out there rolling and stoning. Maybe he ain't like his woman. Maybe she thought they was going to break up. So he like, well, I'm gonna go start one over here. So if I start one over here, at least I already got 3 boys already over there to go and work this land. I
yeah,
don't know. I ain't lived back then, but I do believe there's a little bit more context around some of these stories that we heard growing up and stuff.
absolutely, absolutely. And this brings us to our first scenario question.
There we go.
Um, First scenario. Okay. This one is let's see, Sophia. After
Sophia.
years of explosive arguments, Sophia noticed her tendency to criticize her partner's flaws mirrored her mother's harshness, a pattern traced back to her grandmother's forced self reliance during wartime survival. A therapist labeled it generational self protection. That takes us to the question for Sophia. What subconscious force fuels Sophia's criticism, and how might reframing it as a legacy coach shift the dynamic? A. Personal clash. B. Situational stress. C. Ancestral self reliance. Or D. Poor role models. I'll read them again just to make sure. A. Personality clash. B. Situational stress. C. Ancestral self reliance. Or D. Poor role models.
Hmm. I need to hear A and B one more time.
All right. A is personality. I said personal. Personality clash. I'll read them all again. A. Personality clash. B. Situational stress. C. Ancestral self reliance. Or D. Poor role models.
Man. For lack of a better one, I'm gonna go with C. For lack of a better, for lack of a better answer, I'm going with C.
C is the best answer, my friend.
Yes, the best.
The
'Cause I
best
don't
answer.
like how none of the answers pointed the finger at Sophia.
Well, I
Because even the
mean,
generational, that's still blaming. And even though it's something, and I get there are some generational things or some things that pass down generational or environmental, that gets passed down. But I was hoping that there was something about self, something about Sophia in one of them answers, and that's why I asked you to repeat it again.
Well, so I think the part about Sophia was her recognizing it being in her. So
Okay.
so that's the thing. And then again, remember, we're not blaming them. We're just identifying where it's
Yeah.
coming from, getting down to the root cause of the thing.
Yeah.
And to your point, C is the right answer because criticism can be perceived as like malware script from generational survival, not personal disdain. Recognizing this allows cartography to take place to combat with collaborative debugging. So again, when you get out of the criticism and things of that nature, you kind of become more open and more collaborative as well. Man, I just looked at the time and man, oh man. Okay. Next point is conflict alchemy, the oxytocin
I must be
override.
hungry. I'm sorry. I just looked and I just saw oxtails real fast, bro. Bro, maybe I'm a big man. I'm having a big back moment, man. I don't know. I apologize, chat, but
Oh my
man,
goodness.
that's just what popped up in my head,
Man, I can't get that out of my head now. I
mm,
can't unhear that. Um
bro.
Harvard conflict researchers found that 10 seconds of vulnerability floods the brain with bonding hormones, which is called oxytocin. Even in mid fight, power couples use oxytocin triggers like breathe syncing or shared metaphors to hijack chemistry and reframe clashes. An example would be saying, "Help me understand." It switches the opponent to a collaborator. So that being said, and again, of course, you get choices. Number one, first question: why does suppressing tears or trembling during fights drain relational resilience? And how might surrendering in those signals hijack the brain's bonding chemical? Let me read this again. I just got all kind of tied just now. Why does suppressing tears or trembling during fights drain relational resilience? And how might surrendering to those signals hijack the brain's bonding chemicals? There you go. Or what biological flaw makes winning an argument feel satisfying yet corrosive? And what ritual could reroute this urge into mutual victory?
Man, I want to mess with A, but I only want to touch the first part of it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna digress and I'm gonna slide on over to B.
Okay.
I ain't even messing with that. I know it's probably some ladies in the chat, and I'm going with B. Going with B. Um, what biological flaws makes winning an argument feel satisfying yet coercive? And what ritual could routine this urge into mutual victory? Um, Definitely 100% guilty of this. I saw, especially in my first marriage, I wanted to win the argument. I didn't care. Not all the time. I got to a point where I matured and it was more about coming to an understanding and something moving forward. But I was at a point to where I was just like, I'm trying to win the argument. I'm trying to one up you. I am trying to say the thing that's gonna. I'm trying to play the trump card, the ace card, the whatever it is. I'm trying to make that one good move or that one good talking point in the conversation to win. And it was satisfying. The reason why that I don't know the biological piece behind that, but I don't know. I kind of think that there's some type of dopamine release or something like that that comes from winning, because when you win in other things there's a dopamine release. So I'm thinking that maybe that same thing may occur or may happen when you win an argument. And I think that when you do that, though, you are focused on yourself, you're being egotistical, and you're only caring and thinking about self. You're not thinking about the other person, you're not thinking about the relationship. And as coach always says over here, and this is why I first learned it, and that's why I give him the credit. The most important person in the relationship is the relationship. And I think that when you focus on winning the argument and you get this satisfaction from it, you are focused on yourself. So now moving to what ritual could routine this urge. I don't know what routine adjusted it for me. I will say for me, what happened was I started focusing more on, without knowing what you said, focusing more on the relationship, focusing more on the outcome, focusing more on how we, what can we do so we don't have to go down this road again. So I don't really have a ritual. I don't really know what I did. I just know I got some information, and that information says stop focusing on you and worry about the other person or the relationship. And it don't matter who wins the argument. What matters is what comes from the argument, that has been, what lessons have been learned from it, and what is going to be taken from that argument or disagreement that's going to be helpful to the relationship going forward. So that's what I have to say about this question.
The dopamine trap.
The dopamine.
That's what it is. The
Did you
dopamine.
show on that?
It's the trap though. The dopamine trap, to where dopamine is that thing that gets you motivated to continue along the path.
Mhm.
So, like, the reason why you celebrate wins is because you're triggering dopamine, and then the more you trigger dopamine, the more you want to pursue the thing, right? Well, if I'm arguing with my partner, the perception of me winning is the dopamine trap, because I tend to see my opponent. I mean, no, I'm sorry, I tend to see my partner more
Opponent.
as an opponent, and so that's the trap.
Hmm.
And so every argument that I win creates more of an opposition. And so that's part of the issue or concern that we exist in, because it tend to, like, it's like a corrosive paradox that exists, because it tends to erode oxytocin bonds between me and my partner. Um, and I think it's someplace around 15% per. So every time we have said argument and the end of it is one of us winning, there's a 15% change, prospectively, in our relationship. And so what we have to get to the point is finding a way to overcome that with what is called the transformative ritual. I think that's what it's called. And so the transformative ritual, which ultimately is the perspective pause. And so what does that really mean? That means that now, if we have a disagreement, I need to pause and attempt to see it from your perspective, just so I can understand what it is that you're saying, as opposed to holding firm to my perspective and rendering your perspective inconsequential because it does not sound like mine. So that's kind of like the other side of that. Um, Under that same umbrella, right? Under that same umbrella, when the tears are flowing, it's almost like me throwing myself at the mercy of the court. And the only acceptable response for me in that moment is mercy. So, like, you might be mad, but if I start crying, then you shouldn't be mad no more. You should cater to how I'm feeling or what I'm going through in this moment. If I'm trembling during a discussion, now that's me expressing fear. So now it's really kind of tearing away at the relationship. So, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have it to where the other person does not, I'm going to say, you don't want to have it to where the other person isn't an active voice in the relationship. So tears and trembling, both of them, even though, and I'm not saying that every tear is false, and I'm not saying every tremble isn't real. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it cannot be a learned behavior to practice events, if that makes sense. Because there are situations to where when some people don't get their way, they resort to crying or they resort to trembling, because at the end of the day, you're not making room for me in this relationship. Well, okay, that's a whole nother conversation, which I think is on the lower end of the spectrum. So if those were the thoughts, like, root those out, because that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how to get to the point to where we have a better relationship collectively. And again, I want to make sure that everybody understands this is not just intimate relationships as well. This is also in the space of working relationship, friendships, whatever the case. Um, and when we get to the point of relinquishing the need to do those things, relinquishing the tears, relinquishing the tremble, the things that try to move the needle favorably in my direction, then what we now are doing is we're going back into the bonding chemistry, uh, chemical, oxytocin, which now opens the door for us to be closer in the midst of the conversation. Because we cannot agree on a thing, but not see each other as adversaries. That's the piece that people need to understand. I think part of the thing within you that views somebody disagreeing with you as an opponent or an adversary, not only is it within you, it probably didn't come from you, it probably was passed down to you. So you have to do the work and ask a very serious question. Why do I view somebody's opinion when it doesn't look like mine as an opponent or an adversary or something of that nature? So that's kind of like where my response in conjunction with yours.
Yeah, man. I liked all of that stuff. Especially how you was talk about the tears and the trembling, because I think sometimes, and I think you made a good point of this part. It's not to manipulate. You know what I mean? The tears and the trembling. Like you said, I'm having a bad day. Oh, and now you crying and trembling and all this stuff like this because you want to hang out. I mean, you want to spend some time together versus just saying, "Hey, you want to hang out together" or something like this, or having a conversation. So, um, the suppression of the tears and trembling and fight, and I don't know. I think those things are good, and I think sometimes, how can I say this? I think sometimes when you find yourself in a relationship with someone and you feel or you think that they're using these certain types of tactics to manipulate, it becomes it makes the relationship harder because now we can't get now we have another problem. So not only we have this problem that we want to talk about, but now another problem is we got a manipulation issue in the relationship now that we got to deal with. So now there's one more thing that we have to talk about. And then what happens when the manipulation issue is brought up, but they don't think that it's manipulation, and then it's this is who I am. This is just how I am as a person. So, and again, I do see we talk about in emotional intelligence, and I do see preventing or learning the ability to hold in tears and hold things in and how effective they can be for the relationship. Because if you're known in the relationship as someone who manipulates and your partner sees you as this person as manipulating with the tears and stuff, if you can come to a point to where you can learn how to hold back those tears while y'all are having some of those um deep hard conversations, then I think that would do wonders for your relationship because now the other person can see, okay, well, you know what? This person's able to have the conversation without getting over emotional about everything. You know what I'm saying? So I think it could be a benefit to having emotional regulation during your conversations. And I know I may have just talked about some of the same things you may have said
No,
already.
you're good because you talked us right into our next scenario,
Okay.
which is spot on. Um,
Yeah.
During a fight about miscommitments, Jamal paused and admitted, I shut down because failing you terrifies me. My dad abandoned us when he couldn't cope. His partner tearfully replied, let's fix this together. So, and I know some people are kind of wondering about this. So, what neurochemical hack did Jamal accidentally activate by blending vulnerability with ancestral context? A. Dopamine reward. B. Oxytocin override. C. Adrenaline rush. Or D. Serotonin surge. I'll say it again. A. Dopamine reward. B. Oxytocin override. C. Adrenaline rush. Or D. Serotonin surge.
Maybe I don't know. I'm gonna go with B.
Again, your answer is correct, sir. B.
There you go.
Vulnerability during conflict triggers oxytocin, transforming combat into connection. Adding generational context deepens the alchemy by exposing the root cause. So, great question, great
Mm.
response. This takes us to you got this look on your face.
No, I like that one. I was just thought I was going thought we was going more in detail on that one.
No, I mean you can if
I'm
you
good.
if you want to.
No, 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 no. I'm good. I'm
Okay.
good.
All right. Next is legacy engineering. Trust infrastructure over therapy, or is greater than therapy. Therapy repairs cracks. Covenants build earthquake proof foundations. Legacy engineers designed relational code repositories, which is an annual trust audit, encrypted vulnerability vaults, fail safes, or betrayal. Example: a family's digital archive of video vows. We never weaponize silence for future generations. I think this is a very interesting one because it's not one that I mean, from my perspective, that our family have used over the years. So for you, your option is a question or the scenario. The question is, how might encrypting vulnerability prevent future betrayal from erasing decades of trust? Or the scenario is, let's see, a CEO's leadership team crumbled during a PR crisis. She later, the CEO, instituted monthly trust sinks where failures are dissected and loyalty oaths are renewed. Her mentor called it DevOps for people, development operations. So the question there is, what invisible threat was neutralized by this ritual? So do you want the scenario or do you want the question?
I want a scenario.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Scenario.
I'll read the scenario again and then give the responses and go from there. So the scenario: a CEO's leadership team crumbled during a PR crisis. She later instituted monthly trust synchronizations, trust syncs, where failures are dissected and loyalty oaths are renewed. Her mentor called it DevOps for people. Question is, what invisible threat was neutralized by this ritual? A. Public scrutiny. B. Silent betrayal. C. Skill gaps. Or D. Market competition. I say again: A. Public scrutiny. B. Silent betrayal. C. Skill gaps. Or D. Market competition. This one's a little difficult.
Yeah, I'm stuck between A and B right now.
Okay.
Hanging out over there.
50%.
Huh?
50%.
I know. What was B again?
B was silent betrayal. A. Public scrutiny.
Let me go with A.
Ah,
My gut
wrong.
sent my gut was B.
Your gut was should have stuck with the gut.
I knew
B.
it. And even before I said that, some said just go with your gut and go with B. And I
Yeah.
was like, nah, I didn't go with A. I gotta trust my gut.
And B is silent betrayal, which equates to unaddressed resentments eroding cohesion.
Mm.
Trust sinks, as we talked about, are relational developmental operations, which ultimately equate to like continuous updates to patch vulnerability and enforce covenant codes. And that's why I believe that is such a good one to use. Um,
Mm. I never heard of a trust sink.
yeah, yeah. To this question, um, how might encrypting vulnerability prevent future betrayal from erasing decades of trust? I think when we look at encryption, we encrypt the thing to protect it, right? And so we apply the encryption to our levels of vulnerability, not from me to the other person, but within ourselves, right? So we protect the level of vulnerability because you know how it is. Sometimes we can use the thing that we learned about the other person against the other person when they do something that you don't like, right?
Hmm.
So we encrypt those moments of vulnerability to ourselves to maintain that connectiveness so that when something happens that we don't like, we just don't erase all of the years of our existence together. We address the thing as the thing, not the person tied to the thing. And I think that's very difficult for most people to do because it's hard for them to separate the thing from the person. And because it's difficult for them to separate the thing from the person, they automatically label the person as a thing. That is an automatic violation of our encrypted vulnerability that we have together. Remember, I'm still the person, you're still the person that we had vulnerability moments with. And so we protect those moments so that when the thing happens, we can have a conversation that reflects on the vulnerability that we've shared together. Because we should go within our connection, we should go from vulnerability to vulnerability to vulnerability to vulnerability. It's not that we go from Day one vulnerability, day two vulnerability, day three that's too much. That's overload. It's like maybe month one vulnerability, maybe month two vulnerability, things of that nature. That's more palatable, especially for people who are not accustomed to being vulnerable. So when we do that, now we have these moments that continue to grow and expand and bind us together. I think in doing so, what ends up happening is not only did that thing that that person did to kind of like betray our relationship bond, I think that thing happens less or doesn't happen at all. Because a lot of the times, what ends up happening is that you reflect on those vulnerability moments and say, I don't want to sacrifice that for this. I don't want to not tell her what's going on. And then later she find out what's going on and felt like I didn't trust her enough to share it with her. I don't want to indulge in this one moment to cause us like days and months of frustration together. So you start doing the what if analysis in real time, and then you make the appropriate decisions moving forward. If y'all ain't taking notes, y'all missing it. I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
We improving and strengthening relationships right here on Coach's
Mm.
Corner. Um, the
All day.
vow versus virus framework. Why 93% of promises fail. Vows ultimately are empty promises, and I love to talk more about vows at a later point in time. They're viruses, and they mutate under stress. Covenants are like antivirus software, self-repairing agreements. Example: I'll always support you. That's a vow, but we can transform that into we will collaborate, or we will collaboratively support every situation or every moment and things of that nature. So that kind of changes the dynamics to where it's not one person saying that they're going to do it and then that drives expectation, but it's us saying that we're going to do it together. And as always, my friend, you get an option.
Ooh, option.
Question one: why do common structures like religious doctrine, marital frameworks, and cultural storytelling romanticize forever commitments? Or question two: how do societal narratives glorify glorifying unconditional love, gaslight marginalized groups into enduring toxicity?
Um, let's stick with the first one.
Okay.
So why do common structures like religion, doctrines, marital frameworks, and cultural storytelling romanticize forever commitment? I don't know why. I think because it's the what I think it's the glamour and the to say that you will be one of the I guess the few people to do it. So you're kind of set in a you kind of set in a class where you kind of almost put on a pedestal. I don't want to say put on a pedestal, but for lack of a better term for right now, I'm gonna say put on a pedestal. Or you put in a place where you're better or to where you're at a higher class of person. I don't know. I don't mean it like that in a negative way, but kind of set apart, but at a higher level. And I think that those things I don't know. I think those things are they deal with people's feelings. One thing. I don't know why, but I know they do. I keep feeling like or thinking that I got something and then it kind of goes away. But I think hold on, I don't want you to move on yet because I know there's something here. I think they glamorize being part of a group that a lot of people cannot be part of. I'll leave it at that. I think that's my final answer. I think all of these things glamorize um and put you in a small category of people who are not really able to do it. And I think that's a it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, that's a fair response. I like that.
Mhm.
I think when we look at these structures, um, it kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. Either it's not rooted in the truth, or you just don't know. And
Mhm.
so both being combined becomes the structure of both of these. Like, I can talk about religious doctrine. Well, if you really understand the doctrine of the Bible isn't about religion, but religion is contained in it. And therefore, religion now segregates people under the doctrine of the Bible. Marital frameworks, right? Looking at what whoever created this framework, right? Created this framework of marriage. It kind of puts you in a particular category. It kind of puts you in a thing that says this should be this should be that, this should be this, so forth and so on. Like, and I hate to say this during this particular show, but I will. But the marriage has absolutely nothing to do with me, right? Only thing I do is get to put on a tuxedo and I get a couple of my homeboys, and then we just stand there and wait on you to come down the aisle. So the marital framework within itself does not support the cohesive unit of both parties. It ultimately glorifies one person from start to finish. Um, and then cultural storytelling, like at the end of the day, you're not going to tell me the trueness of the story. You're only going to tell me the story, the part of the story that actually sounds good and feels good. And I think that's a great transition and segue into this question right here, because there is no such thing as unconditional love. But we hear the story of unconditional love, and then when you take the notion of unconditional love and try to apply it to a marginalized group of people who did not experience unconditional anything in their life, now what you're telling them is that this thing called love is your escape route. This thing called love will put you in a position to where you don't have to worry about the conditions that you exist in, the conditions that you were born and raised in and experience on every day of your life, because this is the answer. But this version of the answer, or this version of the response, is not an accurate depiction of reality. Therefore, now what you're only doing is you're gaslighting them into believing that something exists, and then they take all of those things into the realm of what they perceive to be unconditional love, which now it just increases the toxicity of that environment because it just recreates it over and over and over again. So that's kind of like my response to both of these questions. I know I kind of probably went a little long on it, but just my thoughts.
So are you saying you said unconditional love and you had my wheels turning. So you said there is no unconditional love. So are you saying there's no unconditional love between people or in general?
Yes,
Because what just from between people?
all of it. No such thing as unconditional love.
I heard, so this is what I was always taught, and this is what I have always believed is that there's only one place where this unconditional love happens, and that's the love that the Father has for us, and translated sometimes as agape love. So are you saying that that doesn't exist, or just, or
No,
that maybe that does, but when you talking about people, it doesn't exist?
no. Even in the realm of the Father, there is no such thing as unconditional love. You have
Okay.
you have to meet the conditions to be in right standing to experience that unconditional love, but it is
Mm.
still a condition to get there. Everything, and I don't care what version you be talking about parents, because I'm trying to tell you,
Yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah.
if you haven't heard it yet, if somebody haven't put in the chat yet, somebody gonna say that the love that a mother has for a child is unconditional. That is not true. That is
Mm.
not a true statement. It by itself is a condition within itself that gets to that point. That woman went through 9 months of labor carrying that child. That she went through however many hours of I'm sorry, not labor, 9 months of carrying that child, however many hours of labor. All of those are conditions to get to the child. Now, once
Mhm.
that child is born, now you will have a version of unconditional love. But trust me when I tell you, even that is conditional as well, because the minute that child steps out of line and disrespects you, oh, the hammer's coming down. I done did all this and that for
Mhm.
you, and all, you see what I'm saying? So there is no such thing as unconditional love. There's only love. And if we understand what love really means, like even from the source from which all love comes, there's a condition to get to that. And and when you read the scripture, he himself tells you that if you do not love his son, he does not love you. That's a condition. So in all
It
aspects
is a
of
condition.
right, in all aspects of love, there is conditions that must be met. And if we portray this fantastical concept of unconditional love, that's called a fairy tale. The only place you ever seen that came out of Walt Disney.
I got me a free nugget in there. I asked that question and I got me a nugget. Like I said, that was something that I always heard, but just with that last verse that you said that you don't love the yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
That's a tradition right there. And yeah, I like that's why that man, I like having an open mind. And I like where I'm at in life to whereas I'm okay with having all my learned things challenged
Hmm.
because where I learned them, the time I learned them, who I learned them from, the space I was at in my life when I learned them, all of those things are a part of my learning and all the things I've learned in the past. And
Yeah.
when I learned that information versus what I've learned today, I mean, I learned that, man, I think I learned that. I know I learned that in church. I learned it growing up. I learned it and have it reiterated at throughout other churches growing up. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard that all the time.
Yeah.
So it was nice to hear definitely um, a different perspective of the of that piece.
That was pretty good, by the way. I haven't done that in a long time.
I know.
Um, yeah, and like you, I've heard it as well. Um, but even in the realm of relationships, um, you may and it's a funny thing, and you see it a lot in adults, right? All is well as long as you're in the space of love. But the
Hmm.
minute the relationship doesn't work out or whatever that looks like, how do you go from loving that person to hating that person or disliking that person? But I thought you said you love that person. Yeah, but I don't like him right now. What do you mean? Well, love and like is not the same thing. That's for starters. But you two are not in a relationship any longer. You love that person. Do you still call and check on that person? No. Why not? Because I don't love him no more. Wait a minute. So you mean to tell me love is a switch that you get to turn on and off at your own leisure? Oh, that doesn't make sense. So that's the point that I'm getting at. I think a lot of times we have to ask ourselves great questions. And when we ask ourselves great questions, we demand an answer. When you demand an answer, you might be surprised at what you learn. Where did you learn that from and why do you think that exists? Well, go to the source from where you believe it came from. We'll go to the source and you read in the Bible, and the Bible says, no, no, sorry. And sure, I believe we can see aspects of it, but still, you have to get there to receive aspects of it. And that becomes challenging for the person who believes in unconditional love because they also believe that somebody's going to show up to their front door and sweep them off their feet and they're going to live happily ever after. No such thing. I'm sorry. And I hate to be that guy, but my name is Garfield Martin, 555.
See, you beat me to it. You beat me to it. You beat me to it. I was about to get you. I was about to get you.
All right. Last one, generational
Okay.
immunity. Inoculating kids against inherited dysfunction choice. And I think this is important because I think a lot of us were the kids that actually got some of those dysfunction that we talked about, right? Kids don't inherit trauma, they absorb unwritten relational operating systems from parental conflict patterns to anything abnormal outside of their own living environment. Legacy engineers install trust plugins, family debriefs post fights, ritualized vulnerability, failure feasts, and third party arbitrators or mentors, as we so call them. So, that being said, again, last choice for the day, my friend. What unseen curriculum do children absorb when parents resolve fights behind closed doors? Or how could archiving family fights as case studies for future generations turn ancestral trauma into relational textbooks?
Give me a Alex 200.
There you go.
Man, I like this. I've been on some kind of kick where I'm trying to give information to younger people for some reason. This falls right up under that alley right now. So, and what I mean give back is just something that's been on my mind for a number of weeks here lately. So what unseen curriculum do children absorb when parents resolve fights behind closed doors? So here's an example of a scenario. Mom and daddy, they're in the kitchen. Um, their attitude and their behavior is displaying some sort of me and her, or they got an issue with each other. Maybe some coarse talking, maybe some words being said, whatever. Regardless of how subtle they may be, maybe the children picked up on those things. So now the parents go back behind doors and they've been in front of the children biting their lip, not trying to say nothing, waiting until 8, 9 o'clock at nighttime till the kids go to bed so they can finally resolve and have this conversation. The good thing about that is parents get to have the conversation, resolve everything, and then tomorrow morning when they wake up, everything is fine again. What happens is the kids missed out on what happened from bang to bullets. They saw the information, they saw the drama, and they saw the attitude that they may have had between each other, but they didn't see how it came to a fruition. So they're missing a whole chapter in their. And as I saw this question, I'm just like, darn, my kids never really saw me doing that stuff. They saw that part and then they saw things good, but they didn't see in between. So it's like, I think what they miss out on is they miss out on all of the lessons, all of the conversations that show them how to get from the arguing, not the arguing, the belittling, the snag comments, the all of the stuff that we do in front of each other or in front of the kids, that's like right on that line to where we're not arguing and yelling and screaming. We're just being in the same space with each other because we have to, because we can't take a break right now and go and solve this problem until later on tonight. You know what I'm saying? So I think the kids miss out on all of those things that help them get to a point to where they have resolved the fights. So I think that's what the kids miss out on.
That's good. That's real good. I just want to add to and move on from it. Um, I would also say that they see you when the tempers are starting to heat up, and then they go away, or you go
Mhm,
away, and then next thing they know, you come back out, and everything is fine.
mhm,
In their mind, they have not concluded that y'all are doing conflict resolution behind closed doors. They do not even know the techniques that you're using to resolve conflict. They just
mm,
know that y'all were in conflict here, y'all left, came back, conflict was resolved. So in their mind, they're not putting two and two together initially.
mhm,
They just believe that, well, they went in the room, they came out the room, conflict was resolved. So it's like to them, you have to do nothing to resolve conflict. Conflict will only resolve itself.
mm,
Or or they can conclude the more PG-13 plus rated thing took place behind closed door, and that in itself resolved conflict. Both are false because they can go into adulthood and they have no way, no skills, no practice of resolving conflict to themselves. Because trust and believe, they get into conflict at school, they get into conflict on the playground. So, how do they resolve conflict? Fisticuff? Well, that's how you do it in a very immature way. But they just walk away and leave it as such. So they go through life destroying relationships because they do not understand how to resolve conflict. They don't necessarily understand how to control their tone and have conflict in a more adult, mature manner. Let's be completely transparent. Most adults don't either. So now they grow up believing that, oh, well, it's okay for me to raise my voice at, my significant other, man or woman, whatever that looks like, right? That's okay because eventually we're going to go in a room and we're going to come out and conflict going to be gone. That's not an accurate assessment. So they lose out on learning how to resolve conflict. And then because we never teach them the lessons that we learned from conflict on how to resolve conflict, now we can't teach them those lessons learned. That's the whole point behind the case study. How many times have you ever known, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say it has never happened with me. None of my parents ever sat me down and said, okay, look, I got into this type of conflict with your dad. I got into this type of conflict with your mom. But these are the things that I learned about myself when it came down to conflict. I may not have learned at an early age that my perspective is not the only perspective there is to seeing what reality look like. In fact, my perspective can't be the only one to get a complete understanding of reality. So now what we do is by creating these case studies, lessons learned, we're teaching them how to resolve conflict at an early age.
Yeah, man. I like this one. Um I wouldn't mind having all these case studies or that book from I mean, imagine having all those case studies from all our parents or fights. So imagine having a case study of us having the archived information of all our fights from our first marriage. You know what I mean? I got 19 years of stories and lessons and stuff in there that could be passed down to whereas my sons don't have to go through things if certain lessons are applied, you know? So I like both of those questions. Either one of those would have been good. Yeah, I like both of those.
To your point, ain't nothing to it but to do it. Listen,
Mhm.
because of time, we're going to forego true false. We had some true false, but we're not going to do it just simply because of the time. And again, we like to appreciate and respect each person's time. I want to make sure I respect that young man's time as well. Um, Unc, you got any last words for the people?
No, man. I appreciate this conversation, man. We've been batting 1,000 for a lot lately, so I'm definitely enjoying the flowing of these conversations we've been having lately. It's like we're really in sync and really vibing on a really good level. So I really appreciate that. But yeah, man, this was another good one. Enjoyed it, learned some things tonight. We got a couple of good things, man. And I know we're not doing actionable advice, but if I would do actionable advice, it would just be go back and watch this one and then go back and watch the Friday night show from June the 6th. Those shows, two really good shows. So definitely go and do those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I think this is one that people need to watch multiple times. I think within the lines of every question, every scenario that we talked about, I think you can find yourself in there and you can find spaces where you can improve. And don't take it and throw it at somebody else and say, you need to watch this and blah, blah. Don't do that. Nope.
Yeah, don't
Your
do that.
responsibility is to do it for yourself, right? Again, going back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? In order for us to get to some social harmony, we got to get to personal harmony first. And that's me getting to the point of me understanding my identity and then harmonizing with that identity and seeing how the world respond to it. And then I can go out there and be socially harmonized with those people who are who desire to exist in those spaces where harmony exists. So that being said, man, I appreciate you as well. I appreciate everybody in the chat. I know
Real
that
quick.
yes, yes, I go ahead.
Now, y'all can still share the video. Still share people, but just don't be like, hey, you need to watch this because you need to change. Just take that out. Just share it with them. And that's it.
That's it. Take the
That's
venom
it.
out. Take the venom out.
Yeah.
Again, we greatly appreciate you guys. Greatly appreciate all the value that you added in the chat. You guys are awesome. And again, you are a functional part of the show. Again, if this was your first time, like Craig said on Friday, come back. Come back.
Come back.
We keep doing this every week and we do it for you. So that being said, on behalf of my good friend, the Uncle Junior, the consistency coach, my name is Dwayne Dwyer, the mindset coach, and we are out.